Yes or no? No, we didn't really have too much of a manufacturing base in the 1700s. Who was the world superpower back in the 1700s? Who? Great Britain. So, was one of the superpowers. Anybody else? Besides Great Britain in the 1700s.
Spanish,
The Spanish. Spain. Definitely kind of a superpower. Japan, China. You know what? They weren't really on the scene too much at that point. I mean, they were, but Europeans were doing the European thing. That part of the world was kind of doing their own thing. We'll kind of talk about how the Japanese and the Chinese and the Middle East kind of countries kind of fall into this, and the Orient countries kind of come into it. We were trading with them, certainly, but they weren't really what we would have considered a superpower back then. So, anybody else besides Great Britain and Spain? France, definitely France was definitely big. So, all right. You had Great Britain, you had Spain, you had France. Any other European countries that you can think of?
Germany.
Germany. So, Germany as well. Now, I'm going to stop predominantly with those 4 European countries because they were probably what we would call the manufacturing superpowers at that time period in the 1700s. Now, what started to happen at the end of like around 1750, between 1750 and 1770?
Spanish Inquisition.
Well, I think the Spanish Inquisition happened a little bit more than that, so earlier than that. I think that was like in the 1600s, and really, the Spanish Inquisition wasn't really to do with these powers. That was kind of the church, right? So what started to happen over in Europe and here in the U.S.? America was what at that time? We're talking 1750s to 1770s. Were we a country yet?
Yeah.
No, we weren't a country yet. So what was going on? Go ahead. See, this is the part where you guys need to kind of think about as we go through this and some of the stuff that you learn, and then I'm going to tell you the other stuff that kind of relates to my field. So what happened and what was going on in this time period? So what was going on in this time period? What were people wanting? More and more
Land.
more land, possibly. So
More power.
more power. Who had all the power at that point? Great Britain had a whole lot. Spain did. So did France. So did Germany. Who was in control of all the power? The monarchies, right? The monarchies controlled the power. The monarchies controlled all the power. The monarchies basically controlled the craftspeople and the tradespeople, and basically it was the monarchs that had everything built and manufactured at that point. America belonged to and was part of which nation? Great Britain. Come on, guys. So we were a part of Great Britain at that point. And Great Britain was a manufacturing superpower. So, matter of fact, Great Britain, because of their manufacturing capabilities and abilities, you could make an argument that it was part of the Great Britain's manufacturing abilities that helped to propel them to become a world leader and a world superpower. Now, in addition to that, so Great Britain also had some conflicts going on. And of course, over here in America, we started to want our freedom from the king. We wanted to be ruled by ourselves. The shot heard around the world in Lexington, where we got into that famous fight against the British, and luckily we won. But during that fight, did we have that much manufacturing power to actually build the armaments that we needed?
No.
No. So where did we as America have to go to get help so that we had rifles, ammunition, cannons, all of the other accoutrements of war that is required for you to be able to win a war? We went to France, right? So we sent Thomas Jefferson over there as a delegate from the U.S. Continental Congress, and they went to France to try to basically get some support and help us to win the Revolutionary War. Now, Spain was a large superpower before this time period. So, and Spain had basically conquered the Western world. So, if you think about it. So, and what was it that Spain had done even before the 1750s? What did they have the power and the ability to manufacture a lot of that helped them to conquer a large portion of the Western world? They had guns, but more importantly, what helped them get over here? Ships, right? So they were able to manufacture and build a lot of ships. And they basically, you know, if you talk about Christopher Columbus and coming over, they were kind of able to come over here and help to kind of settle this part and bring European nations over to America. So now, we had to battle against Great Britain here in America, and we claimed our independence. So it wasn't a whole lot of manufacturing. How was manufacturing done at that point? What do you guys think? How did we manufacture stuff? How did anything get made there? Was it so? Because today we're talking a little bit about history of manufacturing, but we're also going to kind of mention about some of the technology and technological advances here that kind of occurred at this point in time too. So, did we have a lot of mass production going on? No. Did we have tradespeople? Yes. So everything was kind of manually made by hand. Very time consuming. So very, very labor intensive. So was there any automation back then? No, there wasn't too much in the way of automation. So none of that occurred. So we basically had everybody kind of learning the trades and kind of developing some of this stuff, but it really wasn't until we fast forward up into about the 1850s. So we're gonna jump here almost 80 years. So we had this great time in history called the Industrial Revolution. You guys ever hear of the Industrial Revolution? No. All right, now, again, if this were a history class, we can talk about how the Industrial Revolution really started back in the time of the Enlightenment, back in the mid-1700s. But it really started to come into the forefront back about mid-1800s. Now, we had technology going on here, and we had lots of development that went on. So, the development of machinery. So, lots of machines that started to make things simpler. So, think of some of the inventions that occurred back in the 1850s. So, what do you think about? What are some of the inventions that occurred back in the 1850s?
Like, butter churner.
Okay, so you had a butter churner. Well, we've had butter churners since back in medieval times, right? So, automation, we're talking about things that made stuff faster. So, wagons. All right, so let's break this technology down here. So we're going to talk a little bit about transportation technology. And we're going to talk a little bit about building technology. We'll start in with those. Okay? We'll start with transportation and building technology. In the 1850s, what was your main mode of transportation? The horse and buggy, right? Pretty slow. So it took a while to travel. So now, let's pretend that you guys were pioneers back in the 1850s. Was Illinois and were we here settled at that point?
Yes.
Yes, we were. So, all right, I don't know exactly, without kind of checking myself, I don't remember when Decatur was founded, but Decatur was a very small town at that point in time. So there were pioneers that had come here. If you lived here in the 1850s, so would you say that your life was pretty comfortable?
No.
What type of structure were you probably living in? Especially out on the prairie.
Like a little log cabin.
Log cabin, right? So in terms of building technology, log cabins. So, all right, we had log cabins for our houses and structures back in pioneers as we started to move across. Now, Braxton, why do you think they built log cabins?
There's probably not much of anything else they can build.
Not much anything else that they could build. Okay, you're partially right. Prior to this, if you talk about like eastern cities, so, and what was the main building construction, say, of all those European countries? If you like, how many of you have ever like looked and seen pictures of those European countries with their houses that are like 500, 600, 700, 1,000 years old? What did they predominantly use for their building structures back then? Stone, right? Stone and brick and masonry type work. So, do we have a lot of stone and brick and masonry stuff around here?
No.
No, but what we did have was a lot of what? Trees. We had a lot of trees. So, and when you need shelter quick, all you have to do is fell some trees and knock them down. So, and then kind of put them together with, notch them out, stick them together. What goes in between the logs? What did they throw in the between the logs? So, what do we have in the ground?
Moss.
We throw grass, but not really so much the grass. We're taking the mud, right? We're taking the dirt and the mud. We're throwing that in to help insulate and keep any drafts. Because you know, when you lay two logs aside, is there going to be kind of space between them?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you fill that with mud and dirt. That helps to eliminate any air draft that might come through. So you had to build your log cabin. Now, so who wants to be my volunteer? All right, Braxton, come on up. All right, Braxton, when you were a pioneer coming out this way, you were coming from the East Coast, so you wanted to settle out here in central Illinois, so you were real quick to build your log cabin. Now, how old are you right now?
17.
17, so in 1850, what do you guys think? Would he have been married or not?
Yeah.
Yes, he would have been married. Not only would you have been married, but you would probably by now had how many kids? You'd probably have had at least 2, if not 3. Why did they want kids back in the 1850s? What type of a economy were we predominantly? What was our main driving economy back kind of pre-industrial revolution? Farming, right? So what do you know about farming? The more hands you have to help, the more you can get done, the more you can produce, the better you're going to be. So you were coming across the country. Did you bring your wife and 2 kids from, you were coming from Philadelphia. I like to use Philadelphia since I lived there for a lot. So you were coming from Philadelphia to settle. You had heard about the great opportunities of the great Wild West and coming out here. So did you bring your wife and kids?
Yeah.
No, you didn't. So why wouldn't you want to bring your wife and kids? It's an unknown place. This is the wild, wild west. This is an open frontier. There's lots of dangers out here. You really want to subject your wife and your kids to all the dangers that are out here on the prairie? Open prairie? No. But you went to prepare something for them ahead of time. So you came out on your own to build your log cabin. So when you got that available, you chopped it down, you built your house, you got your land kind of ready, and then you brought your wife and kids out a little bit later. So, all right, now, what did he have to use to chop down those trees?
An axe.
An axe, right? And a saw. So he used that hard physical labor. He probably had a couple of other people that kind of helped you get that way. Now, it wasn't very long and you built that log cabin, but log cabins were great because they were pretty quick to build. But do you guys think that that was an effective use of our natural resources? No, it really wasn't. And we had this development of the towns. So if we talk about the technological development of town, Braxton, go ahead and take a seat for just a second so you can write this down. I'll call you back up here in a few minutes. So if you think about this, Caleb, what were some of the things in the 1850s in terms of technology needed? So we're talking about technology that needed to help you survive in the 1850s and help our town grow.
Like what?
Yeah, what would we have wanted to have gotten and put into our town to make our town grow so that it makes it easier for all of us to live?
Food and water.
Okay, we need food and water. So how do we get that food and water? See, I'm gonna be like asking some questions because right now I don't know how many of you really know how we even get our food and water today, let alone how we got food and water back then.
Like farms.
Okay, so we grow farms, so back in the 1850s and even now. So there are some farm products that we can grow right now. You could go out now, is the corn ready for us to eat right now?
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe some of it is. And we could go out and get our corn ready to eat. But what about in February or March? Especially in 1850, would we have ready access to fruits and vegetables then like we do today?
No.
No, right? So your whole time period, Braxton, in the summer was farming that field to get food enough for you to eat. And what else did you need besides food? In order to eat that food, what else did you need to help you prepare the food? Think about it. So, not a food factory. So, go ahead. Fire, right? So what else would you have needed back in the 1850s? Firewood. So the majority of your time back then would have been spent either farming the land or chopping firewood, heat, and food. Now, in order for us to process that food, we could grow corn. You could grow other things, but here the main crop was corn. So, and what do we need to turn that corn into so that we can still have and be able to eat food in January and February when it's minus 10 degrees outside? What do we have to do to that corn? We have to dry it out, right? And then once we dry it out, what do we have to do to it?
Put it in like a storage space.
We store it to a certain point, but before we can actually use it to make it edible, we gotta do what? We gotta grind it down into what? Flour, right? So cornmeal. So what would you wanna put in your town so that you could grind that crop?
An elevator.
A mill. Okay. Now, how many of you have ever been to Lincoln's New Salem State Park?
Oh.
Raise your hand.
That place is
Okay.
there.
Now, not only do you need a mill, it's called a mill, and there is a good example of a mill out at Lincoln's New Salem State Park. What was the purpose of the mill built back in the 1850s and all throughout the 1800s? It would grind up grain, so we would take two big milling stones, and one would be on top, the other would be on the bottom. We would put the grain in between it, and we'd have different power sources. So we're gonna talk here in terms of technology here. Now we've got some power sources. So who raised their hand and said that they've seen the mill at Lincoln's New Salem State Park? There are actually two of them there. What do you think the power source for that mill was back in the 1850s? Water might have been a power source for one of them. So through the water mill. And what else? What could have been another power source? You know what? We weren't really harnessing wind power too much back in the 1800s.
Manpower. Like-
Manpower, but more importantly, what else is important for you to have on your farm for your power? Especially if you've got these two big, gigantic grinding stones that probably weigh about 3,000 pounds. Yeah, horses and oxen, right? So might use horse, we might use ox, so or some type of cow to drive that mill. Now, we talked about the threshing mill, where the threshing mill is going to take wheat and corn and other farm products to turn it into our grain that we need for our bread and flour and cornmeal. But pretty soon the problem with building a lot of log cabins here is that soon we use up all of our lumber that's in the area, right? So we got to come up with a better, more efficient way. And what else, what other type of mill besides the threshing mill? So we had a threshing mill, but what is the other type of mill that was around back in the 1800s? What type of mill? It's the type of mill that we need to turn those logs into other types of wood.
Sawmill.
A sawmill, right? Now, if you were familiar with the technology at the time, if you knew a little bit about how to make wooden gears and how to make wooden mechanisms, we talked a lot about different types of mechanisms, and we're going to learn some more about these in this class too, and especially in engineering. Mechanisms are really important for us to develop and transmit linear motion into rotary motion. So Braxton, when you built your log cabin, you got your family out. So you started to do some farming, but you had this great idea. You started to recognize, hey, if I built a mill, either a threshing mill or a sawmill, I could make more money. And rather than me doing the farming, I could have the farmers bring their stuff to me and I would charge them to use my technology here to make their life a little simpler. So you built that threshing mill and the sawmill. Now you put it on a river so that you had the use of water. So how does the sawmill work? Technology here. So again, we got a big wheel. When we have a steady stream of water, turns the wheel through gears going from the wheel to the stone. So that then also turns a stone. Now we can transfer that from rotary motion. We can put cams and levers on that, and we can turn that into a stroke that goes up and down. And we can put a big long blade, a saw blade on that as it goes up and down, so that now we can also use it as a sawmill. And now we can be starting to cut up those logs into planks or into lumber so that we can build other types of frame structures and houses. We can get a little bit more use out of that. So we started to build those houses along that same time here too. So, and we started to get into the construction world as far as that goes. Now, as we kept going through, so what else do you need to survive back then?
Water.
Clothes.
Clothes. So how do we make clothes? Back then, so we'd have a animal hide. So you could use an animal hide. You could take a cow and the skin of the cow. You could stretch it out. You could basically dry it out through the use of the sun, and then you could tie it together through leather straps, and that you could use that as well. Or you could start to make textiles as well. So, and we also had the textile industry started to come about. So we had textiles coming through here as well. Now, prior to this, you'd have a loom that you would have to thread string and weave. You guys all familiar and heard about the term of weaving? So where you're kind of intertwining all these threads. And you'd have this loom that would be done to help you make your clothes. Okay? Not very fast, not very quick. So if you think about this, how many changes of clothes do you think the average American nowadays has in their closet?
Probably
100.
15 or 20 outfits, probably. I would say that's probably pretty close, right? Back then, how many changes of clothes do you think they had? Maybe two. They probably had their Sunday best and then their everyday work clothes. So, why?
Save money.
Had nothing to do with money.
Couldn't make it that fast.
Yeah, because you couldn't make it that fast, right? It was very time consuming. It took a lot of time to make this stuff. So it was very time consuming for us to get these, where we could take resources. So as we got into the Industrial Revolution, we started to get machinery that started to help us make things faster. So now, we also talked about the horse and buggy. What else was around in forms of transportation that was kind of a new development about them? So what was another development of the Industrial Revolution that led to a change in transportation?
Train.
What was it that brought the train about? Before we got to the train, we had to have something else.
Steam engine.
The steam engine, right? So we talk about the steam engine. The steam engine led to the development of the railroad industry. So we had the railroad industry. Now, if you think about the railroad industry and these trains, so if we needed to go across these large rivers, think about how many rivers, if we just went across from Danville, if we got on 74 and we were coming west, if we crossed over into Danville from Indiana and we took 74 all the way across till through Champaign, through Peoria, all the way to Quincy and out the other side, how many rivers would we cross?
Just one.
Just one?
Yeah.
Oh, what do you guys think? We'd be crossing the Vermilion River, would be crossing the Sangamon River, which isn't a huge ditch to spasm to get across in the Sangamon, but if you're on horse and buggy, you could probably make it. Definitely on horse, you could get across the Sangamon without any problems. But if you have a big, gigantic train engine, how easily is that heavy engine going to get across the Sangamon River? Not very easy, right? Because it's probably going to get mired down in the water and the mud. So what do we have to build in order to get that over? Bridges, right? So now we started to get more technology. We had the Industrial Revolution that led to the steam engine. And that steam engine led to the railroad industry, which led to us building bridges. And when we started to build the bridges, what were the bridges built out of back then? Wood. Now, the farther we started to build with the bridge, so we can only get so much strength out of a wood beam, right? So once we get to be so heavy or start to make that bridge longer and longer, we eventually, if we keep heading west, what are we going to eventually run into? Which river? What's the big river that we're going to be eventually, the Mississippi, that we're going to eventually run in the Mississippi? Can we build a wooden bridge to get us across the Mississippi?
No.
We could, but we'd have to put a lot of stuff in between it. So we get a stronger material we start to bring in iron, and we start to bring and build iron bridges now too. And we develop what's called a trestle bridge. So you guys have all seen these trestle bridges. So as we start to look, the Industrial Revolution kind of starts to progress along this in the textiles for our clothes, in the transportation for our, with the steam engine to basically power our different equipment. And then of course, one type of technology leads to the development of another type of technology until we keep on going and we start to get more and more automation, more and more machinery that starts to be developed as a cause of this. And we kind of keep on going through the Industrial Revolution. So eventually we get all sorts of our other inventions that come about. And that's kind of, again, at one point, we start to kind of begin to automate some of this stuff.